Next guest is Elder Duane Hollow HornBear. Chikanju Lakota was born and raised on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota. Duane is a faculty member of the Sinte Glashka University, a four-year private American Indian Tribal College in Mission, South Dakota, where he was taught for 25 years in the field of history, culture, and language. He's a spiritual leader and currently the director of the Lakota Studies Department at St. Francis Indian School for the past 5 years. He comes from a strong heritage of leadership from his great-grandfather, Chief Hollow HornBear, who lived from 1850 to 1913. Known to have inherited his father's skill as an orator, Duane travels extensively around the country and abroad, lecturing and speaking on the history of the Oceti-Sakowin people, and continues to advocate for the Lakota way of life. The title of the session today is Thought and Philosophy on Lakota Language and Our Sacred Connection to All on Ushi-Makan, Mother Earth. His presentation will cover these meaningful philosophical concepts and are found in our traditional systems of the Oceti-Sakowin knowledge. Welcome to Duane Hollow HornBear, and welcome to the Oceti-Sakowin Revitalizing Our Language.
Aho, Namakhupio. Oha. Mechaje ke matro hechorecha. Japina. Tukashla sam tukashla he chaje trawa. Ashlemana ucho chake topa. Chaje ki he yahamamani. Chaje ki he washichi ya Hollow HornBear yapi. Ashe matro he chorecha. Chel apelo. Oha. Mana taku iwag laki tekile ehani lakota ki lakola eapikile uchi taku eapiki hena natoshte kapiki hena ehani tuataki na ha khahiak chiwog lakapi hech taku keapiki hena I'd like to speak to you today as an elder, as growing up as a language speaker, and listening to my grandmother who never spoke English to me, and that the philosophy of the language and the persistent questions that I always had, you know, when her teachings and would come out from her in just simple little talks. Sometimes to her, along with others, my mother and my spiritual mentor, who sometimes I didn't know if they were teaching me something or just talking about something in a philosophy of the language. And so I would have to really review sometimes in the evening about what was that grandma or grandpa, what did they mean by when they used this word? And I learned it from one elder grandfather when he says, do you know what, have you ever been called Unchi Hishni? So I says, yeah. My mother called me that. She said, La, unchi hishni naket. She says, you're sitting there like this. So I said, unchi hishni. And when I asked him about this, what did this mean? And in my own research and years later, I really took an interest to this, because the philosophy of our language really tells about life. And the English word for unchihishni was when I thought my mother was telling me that, sitting there saying, you're just you're just so lazy. Because I interpreted Unchihishni to mean lazy. And then when I asked this elder about this word, and then he told me, he said, let's look at this word and let's take this word apart and talk about the philosophy of what your mother, how she used this word. And so we take the word unchi, which we would refer to as grandmother, and he, which means here or arrived, and shni applies the negative. So when you do a translation to that is your grandmother is not here, or his or her grandmother is not here. So when when you are when you are relying on your grandmother to do everything for you, when you sit around and wait for grandma to tell you what to do, to show you what it is you need to do, then you are unchihishni, which means your grandmother's not here to show you. Your grandmother's not here to explain to you what it is that you need to do. And so when you think about words like this and how powerful just a simple phrase like this, it describes a situation and it describes the person and the people who are not literally named, or but you go through your mind and you're thinking about grandma. Grandma's not here. Yeah, you're dependent on your grandma for everything, and she's not here to show you how to do this. She's not here to set the example on what it is that you need to do. So you become unchihishni. So I smile and think, yeah, that there's a lot of truth to that. When I look at my brother-in-law, I say, there's a prime example of unchihishni. So it's words like this that become so interesting. But I want to go back a little bit first now and the introduction as to who I am. When I talked about in my introduction about hollow HornBear, matro hechlo hecha. In our language, when we talk about something in our philosophy, we don't beat around the bush with a lot of excess words before we mention the topic or the item or the person. When we speak the language, we identify what it is that we're talking about almost immediately from the beginning of the opening lines. So when you use the name matro, then you're saying the bear, and then he, which is the horn. Chalorecha means the empty horn, the bear with an empty horn. So in English terminology, when English took the name and retranslated it back, it came out hollow horn bear, which really didn't really have any meaning to it. Although there are some family names that have a shorter version of my name, and that's hollow horn, and they are from the Heinrich Reservation. But I don't trace any, in my lineage work, I don't trace any relationship to that family, only to the hollow horn bear. And I was talking about my great grandfather this morning, kind of a little bit off my topic here today, but it is going to, in a ways, you'll hear, like when I talk about Trunkashila, when we take the word like Trunkashila, when I talk about Trunkashila Matro Hechorecha, grandfather hollow horn bear, but Trum, when you look at the word tchon, and most people say, um, like Titrua, and these are the Al dialect speaking people. The Al dialect speaking people, and tchon itself talks about how a person is born into a way of life, are given this way of life, given this life to live by. So we use this term too when we say Tupi Apetu, which is could mean someone's birthday. So when you take the term Tron, it reflects back to a life that a person's life, someone, it's a living entity, and ka would imply that which has been given this life. She applies relationship, applies a blood relationship. La applies endearment, compassion. So when we use the term kankashida, then it applies to that individual who is much, much older than I, who is blood related to me, that I have compassion, devotion to, that I love this person. And then we can relate it to the oldest one in our family line, which would be our grandfather. So when you say Tunkashila, then that is how the philosophy of the language works. So it's interesting when you do that type of etymology work and taking a word apart and really beginning to understand the philosophy of our language and how we speak. And a person doesn't have to say very much. And you get the, how do we say it in English, the drift of what they're talking about. Or you get it, you get who they're talking about, what it is that they're in reference to. It all becomes understood in just a matter of a few short words, not having to use so many words in context to describe what it is we would be talking about. So my grandfather's name, that name was given to him and to him alone. And that was his name. Now, with the settlement of our reservations, and in your case up in Ojimaka land, your reserves, and I can imagine it must have happened up there when because my wife is Dene, and when they would line up the native peoples, and the person would say, okay, you're going to take this name, you're going to be Jones, you're going to be Smith, you're going to be this, and they give you out these Washichu names. But here on our reservations, our grandfathers stopped that process and said, no, I have a name. I have a name, and you have a translator sitting here. I would tell him that my name is Matrohechogecha, and you translate that over, and it became Hollow Horn Bear. But that name was his, and his alone. But when they settled on the reservation, they probably approached my great-grandfather and say, Hollow Horn Bear, you're gonna have to get with it and start living like us white people. We can't keep track of you when every one of you has your own name. So from now on, Hollow Horn Bear, you and your wife will go by your surname, Hollow Horn Bear, and you have children, they too will be Hollow Horn Bears. And in the future, when they grow up and they have children, the boys, they will take that surname, apply it to their children, and those will be little Hollow Horn Bears, just like the white people. Ain't that cool? Well, now I am the fourth generation today, striving to humbly and striving to honorably carry my great grandfather's name, Hollow Horn Bear. And some things are happening in our extended family, our Tioshpai, and um, there's been some repatriation going on, and I have been able to repatriate back two sacred pipes of my great grandfathers, and also in the last 30 something years, when HornBear had died in Washington, D.C. in 1913, his remains were brought back by train to Chicago, to Omaha, through Nebraska, and back out to our reservation to my grandfather. And my grandfather and elders, when I was young, they used to tell stories about how when they brought him back, they had this coffin, and the children had asked the government agent to open the coffin. But the agent here at the time, he says, it wouldn't be a good idea because it won't be a pretty sight since he's been dead for quite some time and the train ride back. But they insisted, and the casket was finally opened, and the regalia that he wore out to Washington, D.C. was gone. He was dressed like a missionary, like a black robe. Now, history should tell us that we should be very angry. We should be very angry with these atrocities that have happened to our people, and seek some sort of amends to be made. But our grandfathers never pursued that. I don't know why. I hear the stories, but the regalia that he wore didn't come back with him. As I grew up hearing the stories of my great grandfather and in my own adulthood, and later going back into college, I decided to do some research as to who he was, what kind of man he was, what he did for the people. In research, others began to start to take an interest in what I was doing. And I got some assistance in that. And I later found out that the hair shirt that he wore ended up in a museum in Frankfurt, Germany. I took the steps in the last few years to continue to pursue it. I flew to Vienna, Austria, and drove by car into Germany, to Frankfurt, to the museum. And we viewed the shirt, and I talked with the curator, and I talked to them about who my great grandfather was. And it was time for my grandfather's spirit to come home. He has to come home now. We are in dire need of his spiritual energy and what his presence emboldened on the people. And so they says, well, that's not a decision we made, the blah, 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 the things, the governmental policies and things that they always relate to you on the almost impossibility of doing something like this. But I continued to write, and last December, on December 2nd, I finally received a letter from the museum telling me that the museum was now willing to return the shirt home back to me. So I began to pursue this, and I've just been notified that they were going to allow 3 days that the museum would allow me to come back to Germany to pick up the shirt myself. Sadly, those 3 days was a time of quarantine, and Germany and Austria closing their borders to US citizens, so I couldn't go. But seeking and pursuing other avenues, that shirt will be landing at Chicago O'Hare International Airport sometime tomorrow. And I've just received an email today that a little over a week from now, on June 12th, that hair shirt of my great grandfather's will be placed in my hands sometime between 10 a.m. and 12 noon on June 12th here in my homeland. So I wanted to share that because I'm just so excited about the ability to do something like this, because these atrocities have happened to not only me, but maybe yourselves and your families. And the language that goes with shirts like this is Ogale Tranka O, the wearers of this shirt and how it depicts, it's like his badge of an office that he wore this shirt when he was designated as the leader amongst his people, and this shirt identified him as that leader. So there's so many artifacts and remains of all of our Ocheti Shakoing peoples all over the world. I found them in my journey also to Italy and England. In my journeys, I've had the opportunities to ask with any native artifact collections that are in museums, and I'd be shown to these places. And I've seen many from the Dakota people from 1823, when a rich man named, his last name was Balistroni, who was an heir of some kingdom in Italy, who was bored with his life, and he came to America seeking to find the headwaters of the Mississippi, finding the headwaters of the mighty big falls that fed the mighty Mississippi River. So he came to St. Louis and in 1823 and followed this river upward, and in his disappointment to find only a spring coming out of the ground that was identified as the headwaters of the Mississippi. And he gathered artifacts, and in those journeys, he journaled many language words. A lot of the Dakota language of the Dakota people are all in these journals, and with Italian translations to them. There was the guy that was in the Smithsonian that in the, I think it's volume 16 languages. He was going to be taking this guy's memoirs that had been uncovered with the Dakota language and the Chippewa languages, and they were going to transcribe the Dakota words into English. And for us, if we looked at this word, although there are slight little differences in how we speak and how we utilize one of our words in our spoken philosophies, basically we can understand each other, whether we speak L, D, or N. We can understand each other when we speak in these languages. It'd be an interesting work for someone who wanted to do some scholarly work in identifying those those volumes and to go back and to research that within your own people and finding a direction back into your language and if the English translation or who he might have worked with to get those translations. If he understood them in Italy, if the Dakota people told him in Dakota and he understood it in Italian, an English translation might lead to what those words really meant. And hopefully there's going to be some philosophy in those words, some teachings in those words and the usage of those words and those volumes that it would be, I don't know, it would be exciting for some young person to perhaps to, I don't know, I'd like to encourage some young people to develop, I don't know, what, can I say a thesis paper or even do research on this in the language, in the Dakota language. It's something that in the last 25 years that I taught at the university, I taught at the 4 levels of Lakota, and I also taught composition and writing, but I don't want to talk about orthographies that when we get into talking about orthographies and diacritical marks, it becomes a little, I don't know, it becomes a little upsetting in different ways amongst each other. And but I prefer to do it this way. I've always done it this way. His doesn't look right. Hers doesn't make sense. So we'll get into those types of discussions. And I think the real challenge in itself is to wakanja itrokab eotakab na ikja lakota wowichakakapiki helogana ichela eno okachnikapikta. I think the challenge is just to take the young ones, sit down with them, and just start speaking the language. And if they want to write it, let them write it phonetically or whatever. If they have a writing system, uh, that would be fine. But I won't get into the challenges of identifying which is the best or which is not. That's not what I wish to do here today. I'd like to share and probably at some point talk about willpower and where would we find the will of our young people to want to really learn the language. You know, the 25 years I spent at the university, it was hard to find that will. Granted that at the university, the language and the history and the culture, they were core requirements of a student to take these classes in order to achieve their degrees. And so they were, I don't know, driven not by their own personal will to take the language course, but that they needed it so that they could get their degree and that they could get out there in the workforce and get a job with that degree. So to get that 1 or 2 levels of language on their transcript that they passed and look good, so they could get their college diplomas, their degrees to find work, to feed their families, take care of their children. And that is the ultimate goal of survival, of raising our families, our children. But the language needs to go with it. The language, I have such challenges finding that will amongst more young people. We all understand that our greatest rival is what we're doing right now, is using technology. Using technology, years back, now I can't remember the dates, but some that might still be members of this conference, this summit today, might remember those times of that I was able to come up to Saskatoon, and we met on some of these topics and these languages. So I think it was back in was it the late 1990s or early 2000s that I come up to Saskatoon. We shared like this. And, and at the university, at the 25 years, the challenges are still there. And so what do we do now? One of the things I talked about was when we look at where these college kids are coming from, what schools are they coming from? We got this tribal school of St. Francis Indian School that has language programs, but what is it that the students are getting or are not getting that when they come to the college level, we got to start them all the way back over again from the basics, like they were first or second graders or third graders. We got to start over with them back there. So we're never making any progress. By the time they get to college, they should be able to sit down then and do the orthography work and being able to identify an orthography, say, can we work in this orthography so that I can write my paper in Lakota, Dakota, or Nakota. That should be the goal of college students. So after 25 years at the university, and I took the time off, and it wasn't very long when I have to wet my whistle here. When the superintendent of the Indian school here had his HRO person get a hold of me and said the superintendent understands that you're a free agent and he wants to talk to you. He wants to meet with you this afternoon if you're available. So I came here and he says, I have an interesting, very interesting program. We have some grant money we just received. I think you're gonna want this job. I says, I wasn't looking for work. I'm not looking for work. He says, no, listen, he says, we had your son here in school and he graduated from here. And the way that you raised your son, and that's commendable on what a fine young man he turned out to be. Now, what we have here, it says it's called a freshman academy class. It's a CTE class where you're going to take just the boys themselves that are coming out of middle school. And this is the age when these young boys are transitioning into young men. Now, you went through these things with your son. Now, can you help these eighth graders that are coming into first year high school culturally? Teach them culture, everything that they need to know culturally as a young man at that age, leaving their childhood behind and now becoming young men. So I thought about it and I said, yeah, you've seen my son and how I worked with him. How many students? He said, it'll be an all-day job. You'll be taking anywhere from low as 6 boys to 15 boys, rotating 5 hours of classes throughout the day. So I took it. So I accepted the job, and we did this freshman academy. And we talked about not only the language, but we talked about the Lakota values, the values and how these values also represent, we did activities to utilize the values. I said, there are more values than this, but I want to identify 12. Well, it's 12 values, and we're going to identify and go out and we're going to put up the teepee. And each one of you is going to take one poll each, the 12 students, and you are going to set up this frame to the teepee. And we're going to attach a tag to each of these poles. And on that tag is one of the values. But in a class time and out there and in demonstrations, we're going to focus on this value. And we'll attach that tag to this pole. Because the 13th pole, I want you to all understand, is going to be you, each one of us individually. The 13th pole is each one of us individually, that when that 13th pole, it brings up the covering to the frame of the teepee and encompasses that frame, then you are identifying 12 values by those other 12 poles that must be in that home. Those values, those Lakota values, Dakota values, they must be in that home. So you are the 13th pole, and you must ensure that those values are there within that home. So it was a presentation that the principal came out to observe. So what are we doing out here? So we demonstrated, and we showed, and we talked about the one student would say, the value of generosity is this. And they would express what generosity. The value of, well, ohitika, of bravery, the generosity, the fortitude, patience, these values and these virtues that exist within our Ocheti Shakoi culture are identified in those lodges. They have to be in there. So today we live in the square houses, but we will look back at the teepee model always, and we may not be able to live in teepees today. We cannot go back to living in our teepees and riding our painted ponies across the prairie after the buffalo, but we can go forward in life and bring these morals and values into the future with us. Modes, morals, and values of our Ocheti Shakoi, taking them into the future with us in the Lakota language and describing these. I do these by PowerPoint. I wish I would have thought about it to probably have put that up, but that's a week-long class, because we would take one value, and it would take 2 classroom time periods to just go through one value. We just don't say the word and do a description. We're going to live it. We're going to exemplify it somehow in showing it. I want to see you. If you see me in the commons area at lunchtime, I want to see you guys exemplifying what that generosity is. So some might, ask a teacher to go ahead and sit down, and they would get lunch for them. We talk about the greatest gift that you can give is time of your own self. Taking a few minutes of your own life and giving it to this individual. The greatest gift you can give is time of your own. Is to that's that's generosity. The ultimate generosity of giving someone your few minutes. And it doesn't have to be something work related. You know, you see out there, you got to live it out there in the community. You see relatives that are taking groceries out or needs to haul wood into the house. Just go up to grandma's house, say, can I haul wood in for you? Can I split wood for you? Or whatever it is. You need your yard clean. Practicing these ways. And then you're going to come back and write me a short, we're going to keep notes. We're going to journal everything that we do. I didn't get a chance to do this. Um, I've I forgot. Some of the journals will read this. So you ask when you're teaching these courses like this, young people's minds tend to take off in different directions all at the same time. So it's always a good time um, to begin to start to journal, even in class time periods. At the end of a class, at the end of a class, 5 minutes before the end of a class, I would ask students, philosophically, what did you get out of this class today? What did you hear? Name something that that might have made you think about something today, just in one sentence, or in just 2 or 3 words, and turn it into me. So I get these little papers dropped off on my desk. That word, or I heard this, or does this mean? Sometimes it comes in questions. Sometimes these are little ways into language. What does it? What does this mean? And sometimes, our old ways and our philosophy is that we never kept anything from our young ones, our children. And this being an all boys class, they, I had the opportunity that I took with my son to sit down and have a father and son talk with him about the birds and the bees. And so, with a group of young men, you can do the same things as a group. This was so neat when I would rely on say like Joe Marshall's stories. You know what was so cool was that these boys, some of them would lay down was because I brought in a buffalo robe and the buffalo skull. And I chipped away inside that buffalo skull. And I Bluetoothed this little speaker. And on my laptop here, I would play one of Joe Marshall's stories or one of mine. And I would Bluetooth it to that speaker. So those boys are sitting around that buffalo robe, and they're looking because that buffalo skull has got their attention. They're looking at that buffalo skull like that buffalo skull is the one that's telling them the story. And they thought that was so cool. Some of them wanted to lay down on the buffalo robe, and that was accepted. Yeah, I found this more more uh, more it was creative, but more appealing to the students when I would let them to choose something that they wanted to do. Later this last year, I've heard about this, and actually there was what I've been doing. There was a name. There was a name that this method was called. Now, I don't know if you guys use the Montessori methods up there. If you know, and that what do we call that? Autodidactal teachings. It identifies an adult working with some young ones and allowing the young one to choose something that they wanted to learn about. Say, if this young one, I brought my grandson to my office and I have some staffs and I've got a drum there. He asked me what that word meant. So I said, look around in the room here and pick out something that you don't know anything about that you might want to learn something about. And so that you might want to learn something about. And my grandson pointed at this huge bass drum with alkite. He said, that drum there. So I says, okay. Now you tell me first, what do you think this drum is made of? Well, that looks like a hide on that drum, that circle thing. So I said, okay. Well, let's look at the frame of the drum first. Where did that come from? He came over and he looked at it and he said, it's wood. So I says, well, where does wood come from? Some boards? Go, keep going. Where do boards come from? They come from a tree. Okay. So this tree was transformed into some boards that you transformed to make this frame to this drum. We got that far? He says, yeah. Okay. But it's still a tree. Don't forget that. It's still a tree. So you're relying on this relative in the concept of the philosophy of Mitakuye Oyasi, that I am related to everything and everything is related to me. The frame of this drum comes from this relative, the tree, that was once a tall, standing relative. Okay? So now let's talk about the hide, the skin to this drum. Where do you think that came from? An animal. Yeah. But what is it? Is it a buffalo? Is it an elk? Or is it a deer? I don't know. I can't tell the difference. I says, well, look closely at it. You know what the texture and the thinness, the thickness of what a drum looks like. So we identified that to be an elk hide. Okay. So the elk, what is that a relative? Yeah. Okay. Hey, he talked about the elk. We started talking about the elk and we sang a song about the elk nation. So you see this Montessori, the method of teaching is going into talking about something and doing little storytellings and having them figure it out. Not you taking it apart and say, okay, you take these boards and you make this frame. You got to stretch this hide. You got to scrape it. Well, yeah, we're going to get into those, but the basics of where everything came from, because we're going to be teaching the philosophy of Mitaku Uease and also that value of respect to that tree and to that four-legged also too, that comprised to make this drum. So you can also consider that drum a relative, right? Yeah. See, they can understand that now when you start putting things in context. Their philosophy of thinking in Lakota starts to begin thinking, okay, so what about these other things like this table? Well, it's plastic. Yeah. Okay. But you know, I learned something in philosophy. I said once when my spiritual mentor and I went to this big hospital down in Omaha, Nebraska. And the family called him down there because the doctor's medicines were not working. They weren't working for him. So he prepared, he took a few medicines with him. And after observing this young man in the hospital, he gave him some of this Indian medicine, this Dakota medicine, but it just wasn't working the way that he thought it would. So we went home and we went to a lodge. And in that lodge, we said our prayers, and he was talking to his spiritual helpers. And then after that, he says, okay, tomorrow we go back, he says. We go back and we'll see the boy again. And he brought with him a mason jar. And I thought it was medicine again, but it had no color. We were in there visiting this young boy, and he gave him this liquid. And by that evening, the boy's signs began to start to change. By the next day, you could see the progress in coming back towards healing. So that evening, he explained, he said, I thought these medicines were the ones that were going to help him. But in that lodge, they said, "Mini peshutaki he echa yakote." You're going to give him that medicine water, the essence of life, and the philosophy of this water that comes from deep down inside of Ujimaka. Ujimaka is medicine that comes from Grandmother Earth. And so he said, they told me, give him the medicine water. He said, today, after we go say our goodbyes to this young man, he's getting a whole lot better now, and it's time for us to go home. But there's a young doctor there. He's gonna be there, so I want you to ask him. Tell him that I'm interested in to know if he found out what he was looking for. I didn't really understand right away, but as we got to the hospital, I realized that that doctor had taken a little bit of that water and he had taken it back to the lab so that he could analyze it, so that he could see what it might have been that my spiritual mentor was giving this young boy, what was in that water. So I asked the doctor, my elder wants to know if you were satisfied with what you found in your analysis of the water. The man looked at me and he just got stone-faced, and he didn't know that we knew that he stole some of that water to try to analyze it. But here too, again, when we talk about relationship, we go back to Mani Peshuta, the essence of water, of life. The things that we're going to reach these young people with in the philosophy is challenging. And one of the things that I stress with these young men, or even when I was at the college, one of the things that I expressed to them was, we need to understand the way we are today and what had happened to us. What had happened to us is to understand the root of what caused us. And they all had questions. looks on their faces. So I said, let's go back to the 1490s when Western civilization came to this continent. Came to this continent with a way of life, that was based on a theory, of one Greek philosopher. This Greek philosopher, he took a stone and he says, this theory of life, I'm going to explain this. You see this stone, this rock, I can see it, I can feel it, but it does nothing. All it does is it just sits there. That's all it does. It exists. And then he says, now the next one. He takes our sweetgrass, our sage, and he says, and this exists as that sweat lodge rock. Yeah. But this thing has one thing more. It has roots that go into the earth, burrows into the earth, and draws nourishment. Therefore, it has life. Therefore, it is higher than this rock. And then he takes what he calls animal, which we would refer to the hechaka or the tchatchanka or the tachcha, the buffalo, the elk, or the deer. He takes an animal. He says, an animal exists like the rock, because I could see it. And an animal has life like the plant, because it lives. But the animal has one thing more. It has 4 legs, 6 legs, 8 legs, 100 legs centipede, or wings to fly. It has movement. It can move about the earth. So therefore, it is higher than the rock and the plant. And then he takes man. Man exists. I'm here. Man has life. I can breathe. I have blood. It makes me live. I can move about. I can sun dance. I can walk. I have movement. So, but man has one thing more, the ability to reason. And therefore, he is higher than these other 3. And therefore, man may dominate. He will dominate, and he answers to no one but his God. This was a way of life that Western civilization came to this continent with. Domination. To dominate. And they have succeeded to a very big extent of our people. And so we are paying the price today. Leon Petuki Uyanka Piki Lakota Wongalaka, East Dakota Wongalaka Piktiecha. Ash Mukoki Hipshni. Ota Nunchu Mukoki Hipshni. Eapi Ikta Unkoki Hipshni. Chatakomni Washichu Tra Eapi Lena Unkopikta. We should be sitting here right now today, speaking our native tongues, speaking our mother's tongues to each other and understanding each other. But with what this domination process has done to us, has taken a lot away from us and put us in this situation today. So once we begin to understand that and what little we have now, we've got to grab that philosophy of this language and say, I'm taking it back. I want it back, and I am going to take it back. And I'm going to search, I'm going to seek, I'm going to ask, and I'm going to live this language. I'm going to live it and learn about the philosophies of these values. What did Grandpa really mean when he said this word. Grandma, Lakota Womakake. So it's a challenge. I'm not going to say it's hard or it's difficult. I want to delete those words from my vocabulary and say it's a challenge. We must look at it all as a challenge and not say it's going to be too difficult. No, it's a challenge, and we're going to take that challenge. We're going to accept that challenge, and we're going to come back and take back our language. I think this is the time now when we're scheduled for a little break. If our host is watching the time, is this the time for that little break? Or do we have a few minutes to go yet? Or do I have your attention? You want me to keep going on?
Yeah, we can take a little bit of a virtual break here too. So just, no, good words, a lot of good stuff going on there too, a lot of good information. So, Nino Ashtedo. Yeah, we could take a little, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but we'll do that. We'll take a 15-minute virtual break, and then I'll see you in a bit. But everybody stretch out. I know, for me, I'm gonna have some I'll be drinking some coffee and some tea and refuel. I ran out here and I need to. So we'll see you back in 15 minutes, and we'll start up again there too. And good words, and look forward to more of the presentation later.
How did you say wakalapi? How did you say coffee?
Pijuta Sapa.
Oh, Pijita.
Yeah.
Oh, there.
And I heard also in my kushi on the Dakota, they said Huknachiabi too. Heard that one too, word too. So.
Well, kalyapi is a term they use down here, but it just talks about something that they made hot. That kal means kata, something hot. Yapi is those, what they call those conjugation terms. Well, identifies what it is that was made hot. Okay, I'll be back as soon as I go get my
Okay,
one.
we'll start again at 10:30, and we'll get that put that in our schedule here, and we'll adjust with that.
Oh, wow.
Matakapi, you just listen to Mito Pajuta. So during the break there too, it's one of our drum groups. We also got told to put a plug in for Riverside, Dakota, and if any other drum groups that were good drum groups that are good to play during the breaks, let us know. We also had a request for Stony Park, so that's some of the stuff good going out there, and thank the drums for keeping that part of our culture alive. But we're going to go back to our guest, Duane HornBear, with just elder, just a really good first part of the presentation. Look forward to that. But just letting everybody know, if you have any questions, put them in the comment section. And if you have any comments or even good words or anything like that there too, throw it out there, and we'll just give it a mention there too. And if we can't get to all the questions at the end, because we do got time constraints, that we'll forward over to our guest speaker, and then we can answer it, and we'll put them on our page afterwards, so that we're always going to keep on going, and we're going to get to all the questions that we can. But with that, we'll bring in our guest for the second half, and some good words.
Now let's go at it again. You know, one of the things I was alluding to, I was kind of touching on this morning, was willpower of young people. I imagine you're probably having the same issues as what we are experiencing down here. Is what I was talking about, is this technology of our young people to they've always got their eyes, on their phones. Sometimes we have to remind our children, our grandchildren these days, when we're going somewhere, to turn off your phone for a while, look around and so. But if you see people, even it's kind of crazy. It's funny because we'll even find a lot of our older people now too. Everywhere you go, you look around, everybody seems like they got a cell phone. So everybody's always sitting there looking at their cell phones. Um, One of the funny things that happened to me on cell phones is we have this tribal grocery store on the reservation here. It's called Turtle Creek Grocery. And they have a little deli in there, tables, and you can go in and order and sit down and eat. My wife and I were sitting there, and there's this other couple that sat down at the same table, but they sat down towards the end of the table. And when they sat down, and then suddenly they sat down and they had their heads down. So, mitraitsuki wabanina, wachekapi. I nudged my wife and I said, they're praying. So we sat in silence and waiting for them. I thought they were saying their meal prayer. Thought they were, every once in a while I kind of take a look over that way. They were still sitting there like this. And there it seemed like, boy, they're really praying a long time. Finally, I kind of looked back real good over there. And here they both had their cell phones under the table down there. They were checking emails all this time. I thought they were sitting there saying a prayer over their food all this time. So it's kind of good to see people are communicating, but again, it's kind of for our native people, you know, when we want our young ones to get to know their surroundings, and to identify different trees or different birds. That was another thing that I put my grandson in this equine therapy, this horse culture thing. And they were in this great big indoor arena. And they were doing this connect thing. They'd have a ball of yarn. And one boy would throw it to one boy, and he'd hold a string and then throw it to another kid. So the strings, it's like making a dream catcher. The string was crisscrossing. All the kids were being connected with that yarn. And this young grandson of mine, we were going through the woods there one time, and he said, "What kind of bird is that, Grandpa?" So we was listening to it, and said, "See if you can whistle like that bird." So he started doing that, and he started listening and listening. Before too long, he was starting to mimic these birds. So in that indoor arena there, that instructor, she was looking around in the barn because she could hear a bird. He was over in a far corner there, and he was whistling like a little bird. So she was looking around. Then she got back to what she was doing, and then she heard it again. So she said, "There's a bird in here somewhere." And those other boys, they knew my grandson was the one whistling. Some of them, man, they were looking over at him. Another was nodding to him, saying, "Again, again." So finally, she caught on. It was him. She said, "Where'd you learn to do that?" She said, I just listened to them. I just listened to them, and then I tried to copy what they're saying." And she thought that was really cool. You know, when you start to see these kids interact in this way and listening to creation, you know, that's almost like a blessing, but it is a blessing because now you know, when the bird starts answering back, thinking that he's another bird, he can't understand what they're saying, but maybe in time, if he starts to listen and to totally observe these birds, listening to sounds, maybe someday he's going to really understand what they're saying. So I'm going to continue encouraging him to do these things. Now, that type of encouragement is something for these young ones. You ever notice how many young ones we've got sitting at the drum these days? Like the song that was just playing here, that the host was thanking the drum group. in there, when you listen to the words to the song, it's really good to hear what the words are to the song in the language and what they're telling us. It kind of perks us up, because we look around, we listen, said they're coming, they're dancing, they're having a good time. They're coming in here dancing, and you look around and you see people who catch on to that beat, and you could see feet tapping or heads. That's language in itself through the music. When we see the young ones that start to gather at the drums, but I think some more encouragement is also needed to um, learn the songs that have words. Um, Learn them to the words that go with the song. And what is that song? Is there any values? Is there any morals to be had to learn from the song? What is it teaching us? And a lot of young drum groups today, but there's a lot of songs today that the young ones dance to is just a lot of what's the word for that? The chanting that they do, the melodies. There's not too many words, so you get a sense of there's a little bit of a loss of the language there. The language is missing in this song. It's a beautiful rhythm, beautiful drum beat, and those chants makes you want to dance and kind of listen to it, tap your feet to it, nod your head to it. But without the words, you're not learning the story. So songs in itself could be used in teaching language. You know, um, I'll share one with you because there was a time period when an uncle of mine was telling me. He said, a lot of these songs that you hear nowadays at even at your Sundance, he said those songs, many of them were used in a time of maybe perhaps in social dancing or at a time when people were at a loss. Um, but this one song right here, in fact, it was my spiritual mentor that I was going on a journey with him towards Salt Lake City, Utah. And from South Dakota, from here, if you take your time, it's going to be about a 15-hour drive. And he wanted me to go through this part in lower eastern, southeastern Wyoming and northwestern Nebraska. And he was pointing to these high bluffs up there. He said, these particular bluffs over here, he said, there's one road, one path that goes up to the top. And there's no other way to get up there except for that path. So long ago, he said, our peoples would use that place to camp. And there, if they had security guarding that one way up, then the whole camp was safe. It didn't take very many men to guard that entrance up there. And everybody felt safe. They could do their social dancing, their social ceremonies. He said, well, there was this one particular time, he says, it's attached to this song. He says that we use in our Sundance. So I was listening to him. He says, long ago, there was this young couple there was two Tioshbai, two different bands that came to this location and they camped up there. And from that camp, this young couple, they fell in love up there. And they wanted to get married. Their love for each other was that strong, and they wanted to get married. So the elderly grandmothers, they searched by orally, verbally, in the language. They talked amongst themselves, saying, "Who are the fathers? who are the grandfathers, the grandmothers on each side, until they could determine that that the couple was not going to be violating this taboo where you cannot marry back into your own bloodline. If this young couple could both identify a maternal grandmother, then it's no, hands off. You do not get involved with each other if you two both identify a maternal grandmother. And so when they said it's okay for these two to be married, the young couples, families, they got all excited. There's going to be a wedding. It's going to take a little time to get ready. We're going to make a beautiful teepee for her, a new teepee. She's going to have the softest white doe skin dress. She's going to get new moccasins, all of these things in preparation. The young man put his dowry together. He had the ponies, all the gifts that he was going to give to the family, the dowry payment. And he was complete in all of his, but the girl's family, they were still taking time. They were going to need some more time to get ready. So this young man is waiting patiently. And one day his friend comes to him and he says, Kola, he said, you made a really good choice right there. She's beautiful and she was raised in a good way. She's going to make you a wonderful wife. So the young man is agreeing, says, yeah, that's true. For I want to thank you. And so his friend said, Kola, you and I grew up together. Ever since we were little boys, we hunted rabbits together, we went swimming, we did everything together. We competed, we broke horses together, we went on pony raids, we were in the warpath together, we did everything together. So, yeah, we did a lot together. So those are good memories. Well, that's just it, he said. Once you get married, after you get married to her, which is a good thing, but after this, there's not going to be much time for you and me anymore. All your attention is going to be on her. So he thought about it. He says, yeah, you're right. He said, what do you say for old time's sake? We go on one more pony raid. Maybe we can help you get some more ponies that you can give to her father. That would really boost you up in the family. Yeah, we got time. Let's do it. So they gathered a few others in their war party, their Akichita society, and they went off. And out there they found a Pawnee village. And they decided to go for it. But they took on a little too much. The Pawnees were a little more than they could handle. In fact, in the skirmish there, the young man who was to be married, he got killed in that battle. He got killed in there. So they sent word back and they were bringing his body back. That runner came back, went up to the village and told the parents. Then they went over to tell the girl's parents. They found her auntie and said, there won't be no marriage. The young man who was to be married to her, he died in a battle there. So this auntie, weeping, she went into the teepee where the young girl was sewing with another auntie. They were sewing on that white doeskin dress. So the auntie told her, says, I bring you some news that there's not going to be no wedding. The young man that you were going to marry, he got killed in battle. She sat quietly and continued sewing. So the auntie went out. By this time, there was others gathering. And they said, did you tell her? Yes. What did she say? She didn't answer. Well, maybe she didn't hear you. Go tell her again. So she went back in there. And, did you hear what I said? I told you there's not going to be no marriage. But she continued sewing on the dress. And when the auntie came out, did you tell her? Did she hear you? She had to have told me. Heard me. I stood right beside her. She didn't answer. No. She's in shock. She's in total shock. We must prepare a ceremony. What are we going to do? As they stood there mulling about in their sadness, what they're going to do, the young lady came out of the teepee and she was dressed in this beautiful white doeskin dress, had on the beautiful moccasins, uwinkitron. She had on her earrings. She fixed her hair like she was going to be married. And they said, the people just staring at her as she walked towards them. As she walked through the crowd and they parted. And high up on that bluff of there, she walked, they followed her. And at some point, she turned around. She turned around and started singing. Vichashalawa Tevachilako Wawinglakita Ushiko. She began singing this song and started dancing. And as she sang it, continued singing. And she started dancing backwards. And the words to the song says, there was this man. I cherish this man. He is in need of me. I am going to go and be with him. And she danced backwards until she fell off that bluff to her death. So we shared these songs at our Sundance, but I shared the stories to them and say, what does this tell us in our philosophy? What does this tell us in our morals and our values about commitment between a man and a woman, and that value of commitment and that love, how strong that was within these two, and that she will have no other than this one, that the two that who have chosen each other, that she chose herself, that she was going to go and be with this one in the spirit world, and she sang her song. She told, I am going to go and be with him. So when we use these songs in the Sundance, what does that teach us about commitments? Today, when we make a commitment to work with these young ones, to bring back this language, are we going to say, it's too difficult, it's too hard, they don't want it, they don't listen. You know, we made a commitment, and a commitment, you've got to stay with it, stay through it, and meet the challenges that go with this. As Lakota, our philosophy in our lives tell us that when we do these things and we make a commitment, then we've got to see it through. I tell these young men, I say, we cannot be quitters. Don't ever think of yourself as a quitter. You know, there's enough quitters out there in the world. We see some of these are our own relatives, and the way life treated them, or the way made their choices in life, drove them to just give up. But we can't. We have to learn through our music, through our songs, through our language, through our philosophies. What does that tell us about who we are, what kind of people we are? It's not gone, it's not over with, it's still there. All we have to do is we got to want it. And we say, I want this back. I want this way of life back for my children, for my grandchildren, and for those that are unborn yet, that are coming. We chon uki, and now the generations that are coming yet, we want these things for them. Because I'm sure some of you interpret and have heard about what they say 7 generations, the prophecy of 7 generations. And I've heard different interpretations that are all really, really meaningful. Some of the philosophies I've heard about this prophecy is we look ahead, first we look back at 7 generations behind us and what we have in those generations' teachings that we are responsible for, that those responsibilities have been put on our shoulders, in our hearts and in our minds. And we've got to pass it on to the next generation. And we got to look ahead 7 generations. And that's our responsibility, is to look 7 generations ahead. Know 7 generations behind us and look 7 generations ahead. And think about, I've got to do my part to ensure that this language stays alive. I'm going to make that commitment, and I'm going to stay it through for the next 7 generations. And I'm going to put this on the shoulders and the hearts and the minds of this next generation, my own children, my grandchildren, those that will listen, those that would hear me, and that they remind them that it's going to be their responsibility in time to carry this on. And that's what being, Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, that's what it's about. And 7 generations, sometimes when we look back about when one of the leaders long ago on the formation of our reservations or reserves, those leaders, they put forth this prophecy saying, we have to accept this in order for us to survive, in order for us to live, to continue to exist. We have to accept this way of life that this Western civilization brought to this continent and imposing their domination upon us. For a time period, we have to accept it. We have to learn about them. We have to study them and watch how they speak, how they think, how they create, how they do things. Not become them, but learn about them so that we can coexist with them. But sadly, somewhere along the line, we started to become more like them. We started to become them, and we started to forget our ways, our language. And so I guess those of us that are in this commitment, we've got to find ways to reach these young ones and saying, this is who you are. This is who you are. When we make these guttural sounds in the language and you poke fun at each other for making that sound, and you're poking fun at each other and you're laughing at each other. Or when I say it, you're giggling or you're laughing at me for talking that way. I said, I don't mind. I don't mind you laughing at me, but what I really want you to know is, you know, you're laughing at your parents, you're laughing at your grandparents. In fact, you're laughing at yourself because this is the way that we should be talking. Lakota wong lakapi. We should be speaking Lakota. Instead, we're so smart. You kids are so smart, you're speaking a foreign language. And I know this foreign language, so I can speak it with you. What foreign language, you say? This Washichu language, this English language. It's a foreign language to us, and yet we're speaking it constantly every day. But let's go back to who we are. Let's come home and Lakota wong lakapikte. Let's come back and let's speak Lakota to each other, because that's who we are. And instead, one of the things that I'd like to see is, we have a lot of our young people, they go around with these baseball caps or these hoodies or these t-shirts that says Native Pride, but do they really understand what that pride is when they know nothing about themselves? The history and the culture of what we've been through, or what we can take back. And I like to see sweatshirts come out and saying, Madakota na imata, Malakota na imata. I am Lakota, I am Dakota, and I am proud. Woita, that pride. Woita, Malakota na imata. I am Lakota and I am proud. Instead of just this native pride, that's Washichu words. Why don't we start putting our Lakota words on our? We start to do that here more and more on in the school on some of the languages being used on in the classrooms, on the doors, on the hoodies, sweatshirts. And they call themselves the warriors here. They're slowly coming back to it as instead of warriors, I said, why don't we refer to ourselves as Akichita? Akichita, that's warriors. I said, it is today. But philosophy of that word, what is Akichita? In the way what did they really mean with that word? It comes from a couple of words when you say Akichi Yuta. Akichi Yuta means you're looking after this one. So the warrior societies, the Akichita societies, the Tokala, they had elite Akichita warrior societies that you could compare to the Green Berets or the Special Forces. They were that elite because they watched over each other. Today in English, they say, I got your back. You have my back, I got your back. Those are English terminologies. We'd say it's in one little short word, Akichita, Akichita for short. And you're looking after each other. This one is the one that's going to look after you, Akichita. So they've changed the name now, and we tell the kids, this is what it means to look after one another, to look for, not to become involved in these little societies that create, unrest amongst our people, that we refer to gangs. One of the things is I would consider talking to you young people if you want to come together as an Akichita and saying, at our annual Rosebud Fair, what if we asked the tribe is saying, put our society to work. We will patrol the campgrounds. We will patrol around the carnival or the rodeo or the powwow grounds. It says, you're not going to be there to create problems. You're going to go out and prevent problems. Then you would gain that recognition as a little society that serves your people, not to hurt your people, not to bring sadness or pain back to your people. You're there to, if you consider yourself a Lakota, then you need to protect your people, especially young men. This is something that I talk to these young men about, and how they should carry themselves with that oita, that pride of who they are, and having a dream. What do you want in life? You can achieve it. You can achieve it in their world and go out there and carry yourself as a Lakota, as a Dakota, Nakota. Go out there and achieve that prophecy that says we will lay down our weapons. We have to accept this way, but we will lay down our weapons and accept this way, but we will return in 7 generations with that new weapon, that new tool. And that new tool, that new weapon is education, so that we may stand alongside any white man, black man, yellow, blue, green, gray, whatever shade of skin he might be, in any profession, doctors, lawyers, scientists, whatever, and be just as successful as they are, but know in our hearts and in our minds that who we are, and we can speak it, and we can tell them. Because everywhere you go, someone's going to ask you, who are you? Who are you, and what are you? And why do you wear that feather in your hair? Why do you have that? Why do you speak the way you do? I want our Ocheti Shakoi people, our young ones, to go out there and say, you see what you call the ground or the earth that you stand upon, that I refer to as Unchimaka, or I refer to as Ina, who gives me everything that I need to live. Unchimaka nourishes me with the food that she gives me to survive. That is who I am. That is who I am. I am Unchimaka. Or Ampewi. Ampewi. You see the sun that you call the sun, that gives me, that radiates the heat, the energy, that nourishes me, that makes me strong, makes me grow. That is who I am. You feel that wind, that breeze coming, that gives me breath, that gives me the breath of life. That is who I am. You feel that rain. You feel that rain, that water, that essence of life that I drink that heals me. That is who I am. And this feather that's in my hair comes from that Wambali, the Wamadi that takes my prayers and my dreams to the highest. That is who I am. So you asked me who I am? I am your relative because I am all of these. I am one with creation. This is what our Akichita, our Ocheti Shakoi youth need to understand, need to know. And as we journey back, as we make our journey back, that it's not impossible to come back. It's a must. It's imperative that we do come back with our language, and that we find the ways. Today, here at the school where I'm the director of the Indian Studies program here, I've been here 5 years, and I just took over the directorship here a year and a half. And I watched the language program working here for the last 30 years and not really developing any speakers. They are knowledgeable about words and phrases and some of the history and culture, but not really any speakers coming out. And when I was at the university, I thought, what if we went back to the youth, to the little ones? Because for me, for all of us, we should look at these little ones and say, we still have a connection to the innocence and the purity of creation. When we look at these little children and say, they're so innocent, they're so pure, before the other influences attack them and turn them into whatever influences create, let me influence them with the language. Let me be that influence with them. I'm going to be here as their grandfather all day long. Every day, I'm going to be with these kids and I'm going to tell them, I am your grandfather. I am your grandfather. Your parents have to go to work. They have to stay home. They bring you here. So I'm going to watch over you all day long. And I'm going to talk to you as a grandfather. Lakota wochichakapikte, ampeti ioila. Lakota wonglakikte, Lakota wauntikte, Lakota ushkatikte, Dakukesh Lakota ichukopikte. We will do everything in Lakota. So I put in for a grant through the Bureau of Indian Education, and I successfully received a grant that is going to allow me to do K-5 total immersion. And I want to use that Montessori method of reaching these little ones. And we've got a number of fluent speakers. I didn't realize how many fluent speakers still exist, even within the school year, but they're not utilizing them. Only because they don't have that certification, that white man's paper saying that they can teach in the school, that we all have to go through. That's something that I frown upon. There's got to be another way. The Ocheti Shakoi needs to find a way saying, "Nya Lakota woyak lakecha, Lakota uspewuchakikte, Lakanja kilena." You speak Lakota language very good. You are going to teach these young ones how to speak Lakota. Spend a day with them. Speak language. And so those that have certifications here, I can utilize them, and they're willing to come into the classroom, and we're going to do these immersions, K-5, and they've given me a classroom to do this. Sadly, we have to follow the state standards yet, but we can do these things. We can do these things all in Lakota. The curriculum has been developed that we can do it using this Montessori method. We're going to create this classroom. We're going to be doing some training sessions with these teachers and show them how to use these Montessori methods and with what they call the 3 R's in language. And we're going to use the oral proficiency index and accrediting or testing our students, not the standard Washichu way of testing them. We'll use our native way of encouraging and working with our youth to get them to express themselves in the language. Hello, do I have time? Am I to leave some time for some questions, or is that time yet?
Yeah, I think we got about, you got about 8 minutes left, 10 minutes left, and then we'll get into some questions after that.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Okay, good stuff.
All right. So the dreams of our people, sadly, some of the language that I heard in growing up too, from some aunties and uncles, how come you didn't teach your children to speak? And I said, they don't care. They don't care about it. When I die, I'm going to take it with me. And it's sad because they did. But when I was growing up, we had a home with here in the United States, long ago, if our American Native peoples here knew anything about acts and policies, it would be us because we have been put through so many acts and so many policies, such as these relocation acts, where they relocated families off of their homelands and stuck them into urban cities and gave them jobs to become and just blend them right into the Washichu world so they'll become brown Americans. And in some places that's still working. But my mother my mother brought us back, and when we came back, my grandmother my grandmother said only one short phrase to my mother, and my mother couldn't respond. She simply said, "Hokshila kilena mitkawa, hena iwi chawa chuna ichakwi chainte, ne wichinchalake wichalu hakte." She said, "These boys belong to me. I'm taking these boys and I will raise them. You can raise the girls." She took me and my little brother, and my grandpa and her raised us, and that's where we learned the language. Because when someone would come to visit, grandpa had company or grandma had company some evening when we came in from playing outside, all grandma did was, with her little sign language, be quiet and listen. And she'd give us a bowl of soup and we'd go under the kitchen table, sitting there eating our soup and listening to them talk. Sometimes they're in Lakota, they're talking about perhaps personal concerns, family concerns, community or tribal, or what's going on out there, what news have they heard. They talk about the old war stories or they share stories. And so we were just totally immersed into the language. I always thought that was the way life was everywhere until I got into boarding school and realized that a lot of my own relatives weren't speaking the language. And saying you can't talk around these priests, those nuns, don't really speak it around them, because they're going to think you're talking about them and they're going to get mad at you. So it was a lot more English, although some people did speak Lakota. If we were out on the playground, we just by with some relatives. When we were out there, we really spoke the language out when we were by ourselves. When you see the matrons in them, it's always not too much Lakota. So that was always a fear that they lived with, that we were talking about them. But I guess we must have felt the same way too before we learned English, or our grandparents. Because you can imagine what some of our grandparents and one of our ancestors must have been put through in forbidding them to speak the language, and that some of them chose not to teach their children for fear of them being punished, and that they would only be successful if they spoke English. I guess I would like to use myself as an example of saying, well, I did pretty good, okay for myself. And I do the Lakota ceremonies, but I have their weapons also too. I can speak their language, understand them. I got their degrees, and I can do things just as well as they can, if not better. So it's that prophecy that the old ones set forth, saying, learn about them and speak their language, but never forget who you are. Do not become them. And I'm hoping that I have succeeded, and I want to influence other individuals to perhaps in their own way think about these things and go for it and say, I am Lakota, Dakota, or Nakota. I'm going to be who I was born to be. I wasn't born white. I wasn't born black or Chicano or any other race. I was born a Lakota, and that comes with responsibilities. And that's the key word. responsible, being responsible. And a lot of us, sadly, don't know what responsibilities are at. And, we don't live up to what we should be doing. But we can come back, and I see us coming back. And sometimes it's going to be a little painful, but we can't. One uncle always told me, says, we can never give up. We can never stop what we're doing. We got to continue it on. You can rest when you're back into when Ojimaka covers you up, and then you can rest and you make your journey home. So, as elders, I guess I look forward to that, and you begin to realize, I don't fear death. That's when I'm going home. But while I'm here, I'm going to live up to my responsibilities and my commitment. And that's, I guess, what being a Lakota is about. I'd like to see more and more of all of my relatives in all three dialects start to feel the same way that I do. If I can influence anyone out there, um, I feel good. I used to feel that way when I did college classes, saying if I reach one student out of 25 students, then I will feel success. And many times I come away from the semester saying I succeeded. There's always one student or two or sometimes more come back and they want to know more. They want to learn more. So I do a lot of storytelling too around my teachings. I would relate it. In fact, I put my students into my teachings. Saying this is about you. It's not something that's abstract away from you. These things I'm teaching you is all about you. I'm teaching you about yourself, your history, your culture, your language. It's all about you and me. So it's not a job. I mean, it's a yeah, I get paid for it, but it's a responsibility, and that's what it is. It's fulfilling our responsibilities. Yellow.
Okay, I think we're good to go. Just turn to my teammate there. Is there any questions that you have off the top here? I think we're good there too with the questions there too. Just one question I guess came from one of our other members that had just texted me there too. Just how what do you think of technology as a teaching tool though too? I know like there's sometimes we got to watch our grandchildren and those type of things or our children with the overuse of these devices there too, but can they be used also as a learning tool?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we could embrace it and put it into the language. You know, um, it was good, but then again, it depicted, um, should I say, violence. It was when my wife's people, the Dene people in Arizona, they took, was it Star Wars? Star, yeah, I think it was Star Wars, and all the dialogue was in Dene. I don't know if anybody's seen it. All the dialogue was in Dene, and I couldn't understand a lot of it, but it's just the expression of anger, expression of conflicts um, was being expressed. I think we could use this technology to create beautiful sceneries. A lot of things that children look at today, it's always got to be something in conflict with another. So I guess in a way, looking at these, um, how can we create them where it embraces our values and our, our philosophies into these animated ways of um, speaking to each other um, instead of always portraying something in conflict with each other.
Um, I got another question here. Is is about I guess dialects or accents here too. Just asking about learning the language, I guess, for different accents, and just what's the best way to get through? I guess if you have a Washicho accent or I think it was Italian or any of those other languages that you brought up there today too. What's the best way to get through so you can sound more Dakota or Lakota too? So
Um, I think teach the Lakota phonics. Create a Lakota phonics class. You know, um, our 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 dialect, especially in our vowel system, and how we use these vowels, nasal or guttural, not guttural, but the vowels can all the we identify 8 vowels in the Lakota language, and all 8 vowels can be found within the numbers 1 through 10. Through 1 through 10. Then another way I esteem some uh, when I reach a young one's self-esteem in them is saying, you know, in Washichu in English, you can say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Just rattle it off that quick. Do that once. So a young one does it. Why? Why do I do that? He says, now do it in Lakota. In Lakota? Yeah, you could do it in Lakota just as fast. So sure you can. Dupa, dupa, shakpa, shakla, vichemna. Really? So I said, that sounds weird. I said, to you it does right now. But once you learn it, learn the numbers. Nupa, tupa, shakpa, shakla, vichemna. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Or even the odd numbers. How many shakla? So it's practicing those vowel sounds um, in phonics, and the Lakota begins to hear them start thinking, making those sounds, moving their tongue around, and um, I think I think that's about the best way I can explain it. Is just keep working with the um, don't overcorrect, but and they're going to come back and say the young ones are going to come back to you and saying, my uncle doesn't say that. He doesn't say it like that. He told me to say it like this. And there's going to be a shortened version. I'm sure that up there in Ujima culture land up there, you probably have relatives who tend to speak in a street language, and they speed up the language. They, um, I used to hear it. Uchi Lakota woman yake anta chahiachchi moglake ohechel Lakota eapikule daya nawach. My grandmother sometimes speaks to me. She would speak slowly and pronounce words very carefully, phonetically, all the sounds. And so I understand totally what she's talking about. But um, I don't know if you have the same situation as we might have here, where sometimes we attribute some of these strange sounds, that I call it, um, where we got this op, op, oop, eep sounds that are at the end of words. And I addressed this and kind of embarrassed some of the speakers who said they were fluent speakers when I said, how come where did those sounds come from? Is that just street language? And one told me it was the influence of our grandparents who went through the boarding school system when they taught Latin in high school. And then the church, the masses were totally in Latin, so they had to learn Latin. And there was a lot of those oops in the Latin language. So when they came back and they started speaking the language, those sounds naturally kind of latched onto some of our words. Like I said, like the word chi. The word chi means want. It doesn't identify what it is I want or you want, or what anyone wants. It just identifies the verb want. Or if we say cheapy, and there's the full pronunciation of cheapy, which makes it into a plural sense when you add b. But it says, doesn't identify who it is, um, what group, two people, or if it's third person plural. Um, it makes it plural, but now when we speak fast and we say chin hecha chin, we use the word chimp. So where did I, so I said, where does this word imp, where did that come from? So we're going to, I don't know if you have this issue up there where um, henna op, we use this, um, these sounds, they're attached onto some words. I'm trying to think of some right off the hand, but it's a, it seems like it's a reservation slang language. And sometimes, sadly, it's blended in with a lot of alcoholism also too on our homeland here. People, you understand what they're talking about because you know I know the formal fluid language. So when they're speaking in slang, I can understand exactly what you're talking about. I was told from when I would Lakota na na kichi honey Lakota wakalakapiki helogana wakalake. Somebody said, you speak the old language. You're speaking a lot of the old language where there's full words and full pronunciation of words. But, they knew what I'm talking about, but they're used to the fast reservation language. I don't know if that helps.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because there's a lot of slang, and even between families, communities,
Oh, yeah.
the way they say different things and terminologies too. So different endings and just, or they speed it up or they cut things off too. So it's always.
Now, one of the things we noticed here too is that in the beginning, in the 60s and 70s, there was noticeable personalities and characteristics between Tioshbais and how a grandmother from one community might say things a little bit different from another grandmother in another community. Same topic, but just saying it a little differently. Personality and characteristics.
Another question here, Duane. I got actually a couple people are texting me in questions now too, but I think we got time for one more there too. A lot of mixed marriages and up here would be like Shahir, Dene groups too, or even probably down in your communities. But kids growing up with hearing different languages. So there'll be two indigenous languages spoken in a house. And your thoughts on that? Is it confusing for the kids, or kids are smart and they can figure their own way through it sometimes? So the mom might say how to eat in their language. You may say "otapo" in our language, or you know what I mean, like that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it makes them a little smart. Well, maybe I'm speaking from a personal point of view because my wife is Dene from Arizona, and she speaks a lot of Dene fluently around the grandchildren. When she's with them, they would pick up on that. If I'm going down the road and we pull up to a stop sign with my grandson, uh, I look over down the road and he'd look and he'd say, Duane, there's no one. There's no one. And he would say, Aten, which means there's nothing. He might come back with Aten for me. But then I would understand because I understand some of the name my wife speaks to. I was telling her, I did speaking at the eighth grade high school graduation here today. I said, when I came to work here 5 years ago, I heard about this worker. I seen this guy, and I said, he doesn't look Lakota. Who is that guy? And they said, that's Big Merle. He's Dene from New Mexico. Oh, he's Dene. My wife is Dene. I want to talk to him. I said, my wife gave me this name. My wife gave me this name. She calls me this all the time, and it really sounds cool. It kind of pricks me up because it kind of sounds like a word that somebody might use in Star Wars, like a big warrior or something like that. So I went up to him and I said, my wife is Danae. She calls me this all the time. What is this word that she calls me? What does she call you? She calls me Jai. What does that mean? And he says, you don't want to be called that. I said, why? Doesn't it mean big warrior or something? Good hunter or something? No, he's calling you one who never listens. Oh man, I thought every time she says, Jai, she says, you don't listen. You're not listening. One who never listens. But
No, yeah.
I think they, I think the kids pick up on those if you're speaking them around the house, like my grandson, my grandchildren. They hear my grandmother, and they understand her. And when I'm talking with them, they don't speak it fluently, but then they understand what I'm saying. Now the encouragement is that to get them to start saying more and more and more. That's the challenge that we have now, also too. And I'm hoping they're not going to mix Dene with Lakota together. That'd be a whole new language if they start doing that.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens there too. They're using two, how do you say it? In a sentence, there'll be two languages thrown in there, and the kid
Yeah,
understands. But does the does the does the kid start using that forward there too? So it's,
but it happens. The European children over there, when I traveled to Europe a number of times there, those kids over there in school, they're learning two or three languages because their countries are so small and they cross borders quite a lot. They learn Italian or French and Italian along with the English. They cross borders a lot. So they can speak three, four languages. And I think our kids, if we get them young, we can start getting them young, which is our goal. And we're going to start to, we're going to see the impact.
no, I think that's time we got for today. We got just a couple of more questions, but we'll get them over to you if you can answer them however you want to answer them, and we'll figure that out with the committee. But any last words you want to say before we finish up here?
I just want to encourage everyone to remember their commitments. We made a commitment to do this, and it is our responsibilities to fulfill those commitments. That's what being members of our Ocheti Shakoi is about. Aloha. Pila mai apalo, bita kepe.
Oh, but I'm happy to. Yeah, you know what? Just thank. Great presentation. Really good philosophies in there too. I know it's tough for people to take notes on a lot of the stuff and what's being taught here, and some good thoughts there too, and even the beautiful story that I heard there too. So like, just ask Duane. It's okay to use some of the information when we go for
Well, absolutely,
our presentation.
absolutely. The airwaves are clear, and I get the opportunity to come back to Saskatoon. I'll jump on the opportunity. Beautiful
Okay
country.
then. Well,